So part of the discussion this week is really about consistency because cognitive dissonance has to do with being consistent between beliefs and actions and between individual beliefs and between individual actions. So also dealing with consistency are two theories the book only mentions but doesn't really discuss but are actually rather important in persuasion, and that's balance and congruity theories. And these are really the brother and sister theories. So balance theory is the first one. And it's sometimes called the POX theory. I know it looks like it's saying POX. It's not, it's POX. And let me tell you what the P, the O, and the X are for. The P refers to a person. And when we say the person is the one that we're concerned about. Who are we talking about? So when we're talking about the target of a message, that's the person. So let's say that we're just going to talk about you, right? Because many times we think about examples, it's easy to think about ourselves. So the person we're talking about is you. And the reason I'm emphasizing who the person is because the O refers to the other person. So we're talking about is you, and you are going to have a relationship with another person, right? So the O is that other person, and we're going to talk about how you feel about them later. And so this is someone that you are aware of. And it could be a friend, it could be a parent, it could be a mentor, right? But it could also be a celebrity, it could be a politician, right? It's just somebody else that you are aware of. And this theory many times is used when we're talking about issues of endorsements, so you can see how being aware of another person is important. Sometimes you see a product being advertised and you think, is that person famous? I don't know who they are, right? And so it has to be a person that you're aware of to really work very well, that is. And then X is an object. And by an object, I don't necessarily mean a thing, though it could just be an idea. So we could be talking about a political issue being endorsed. That political issue would be the object. So we have a person, in this case we're going to say it's you, another person, it could be me, it could be a friend, it could be someone famous that you know. You don't have to like them, by the way, right? That's actually pretty key there. It's just some other person. And there's then something, an object or an idea that we're concerned with the opinion of, right? Whether it's a political position or a product or a behavior, right? There's something that we're talking about. And with all these, we're going to talk about pluses and minuses. And we have a concern for the plus and minus relationship between components. Plus is positive, minus is negative. So we're asking, do you have a positive view, right, as the P, a positive view of, if I'm the O, do you have a positive view of me, or do you have a negative view of me? Do you have a positive view of the object or a negative view? And then do I have a positive or negative view of the object? Right, so we're dealing with pluses and minuses. That's the building blocks of this theory, because now we're going to do some drawing with it. So balance theory, right, is emphasizes that we want balance versus imbalance. Much as cognitive dissonance talks about consonance versus dissonance, this theory talks about balance versus imbalance. So balance, happy face; imbalance, sad face. And the idea is that we feel pressure to create balance. And when things are imbalanced, we will make the necessary changes in our beliefs, in our attitudes, in our actions to create balance. Again, you can probably see how this aligns with cognitive dissonance theory. So the P and O relationship is key. How you view the other person is central to understanding whether or not there's balance. That is always the place you look first. What is the relationship between you and the other person, or between P and the O, the target of the message and the other person who's endorsing or who's presenting this message, right? What is that relationship? Is it positive or negative? Because whether that's positive or whether that's negative is what determines whether or not we have balance. So if P, if you like the other person, if you like me, right, then you want whatever you think of the object, right, that PX there, right, whatever you think of the object to be the same as what I think of the object. If you like me, do you like me? Right. If you like me, then balance occurs when your view of the object, positive or negative, is just like my view of the object, which is also positive or negative, right? We want them to be equal. We both like the thing, we both don't like the thing. So for instance, you know, I like the Killers, right? So I have a positive relationship, that's the band, right? The Killers, right? Okay, so if you also like the Killers, then this is a state of balance, right? So balance is about having shared feelings. We both like the Killers. If you don't like me, let's not go there right now. I'm very fragile. Then for you to experience balance, we are not going to have the same feeling about the object. So I like the killers, and you're going to say, huh, typical, I can't stand them either, right? So you can't stand me, you want to also be able to say you can't stand the killers. Because I mean, think about the times you've met somebody, you've had a professor, whatever, you really didn't like them, and they liked something, loved something that you also liked. And you thought, man, I want to dislike them completely, and here's one redeeming quality about them, right? That's a state of imbalance. You're sort of torn because you want to dislike everything about them. Maybe we shouldn't talk about hate this way, but right, you dislike a person. It makes sense that you want to dislike what they represent, but here they represent something you like. That would actually be imbalance. But what I'm showing here is what it takes to achieve balance. If you like the other person, you want to have the same attitude about the object. And if you dislike the other person, you want to have opposite, right? So you can say, I don't like Berkeley. And of course you'd like the killers. They're the worst, right? That would make you feel better about things. Also, why don't you like me, right? So balance is having different feelings because you don't like the other person. So why this plus and negative? Why is it that negative requires things being opposite to each other and positive requires things being the same? I offer a math theory interlude. Very quickly, for the two people out there for whom this really means something because you like math and you really get it, subtraction is really the addition of the opposite or the inverse of a number, right? So 8 minus 3 equals 5, we always think of it that way. There's that minus sign. Technically, that minus sign means that what you do is you're adding the inverse. It means 8 plus a negative 3. So the negative sign means we're supposed to create inverse or opposing relationships, right? So the negative is an inverse relationship. If that meant something to you, fantastic. If it didn't, don't even worry about it. Back to balance theory. So here we have the P, the O, and the X. Remember, we're always most concerned with the relationship between you and the other person. So let's say that we're going to stick with this class for a second. You like me, right? Or it could be a politician, whoever. But say you like me. You go, yeah, Berkeley. He's a solid dude, right? He's a righteous homie. Okay, positive relationship. And you know that I like the killers, right? Or I like Pepsi, or I like whatever it might be, right? Then if you also like killers, or you also like the Pepsi, we're going to say this is balanced. Because again, you have a positive relationship toward me, or positive view of me, so therefore we want our views of the object to be the same. Now, let's say in this scenario, you don't like me. You don't like me, right? And you find out that I don't like so I will not try to offend people here. I'm not a big fan of country western music. Actually, I'll tell you what, I like country western music that's just a little bit older, right? So more like the 80s, 90s. Barbara Mandrell. I mean, I make all exceptions for Dolly Parton because she transcends all things because she is pure music. Okay, but still, you find out I don't really like country western music and you don't really like me, but you also don't like country western music. This is actually unbalanced, right? Because you don't like me, you want our attitudes of the objects to be different from each other. But we both agree country western music, at least country western music today, it's not that good. And you agree with me, and that's not imbalanced because if you dislike me, you also want to disagree with me, and here we're agreeing. So this means it's unbalanced. Other examples very quickly. Here's a POX again. And again, let's say you like me, right? And you know that I don't like country western music, and you do like country western music. Because you like me, these things are supposed to match, but they don't match, right? That positive means matching, but they're not matching. So unbalanced, sad face, right? If we look at that again, right? You don't like me, but you find out I love Dolly Parton. Oh, and by the way, one of the best gifts my wife Ivy gave me is tickets to go see Dolly Parton live. It is a serious bucket list experience. It is so good. 3 hours, no opening act, all her, amazing. Okay, so you don't like me, but you don't like Dolly Parton, right? And you also, for some reason, you don't like Dolly Parton. I don't know what that's about. I don't want to delve into it. But because you don't like me, my love of Dolly Parton gives you one more reason not to like me, and so it's balanced, right? And so the idea here in persuasion is that when situations are unbalanced, right? So if we look at the one to the left there, you like me, and you know that I don't like something that you like it, that maybe then you'll think about changing what you think so it'll feel better, right? You probably had that happen. Someone you really trust endorses something or likes something you don't like, and you think, oh, well, maybe I've been too critical of it. Maybe I've been too harsh on it, right? There's a state of imbalance. And so now you're willing to reconsider your position in an effort to create balance, right? That's what's happening there. So that's balance theory. Now, there's something called the attraction effect. And the attraction effect says that sometimes we have imbalance, right? Sometimes you and I, we like each other, but we disagree about something, right? So we like each other, but see how we disagree about something that's actually a state of imbalance, but we are actually glad for, but we are glad for the fact that at least we get along, right? So we say, well, we're going to agree to disagree. Sorry, the agreement effect thing came up too early there, right? We're going to say, it's all right, we're going to agree to disagree. I'm just glad that we can get along. I'm just glad we can be friends. So people, sometimes they're going to be crushed by it, but the attraction effect says, well, even if we don't agree, I'm glad at least we're still friends. The agreement effect says sometimes there is imbalance because you and the other person share an attitude, right? What you actually share the same attitude about an object, but you also don't like each other. And even though you don't like each other, you say, well, the agreement effect here is, even though we don't like each other, I am glad that at least we can agree on this one thing, right? So that's the agreement effect. I want to take a moment to talk about this again in terms of persuasion, what all this really means. We're talking about balance theory. There may be a time in politics where there's a politician you don't like, you don't trust, whatever, and they endorse something that you also like. That may be a red flag for you, right? You may suddenly think, wait a minute, why do I like that? You're not going to change your mind just to be contradictory, but you may think, if they like it, is there something I'm missing? Maybe I need to go back and look at this further, right? So as opposed to enjoying the agreement effect, you might say, wait a minute, why are we agreeing here, right? Or you might say, or you might go and do a little more work. But if you do trust them some, you dislike them, you trust them, but you dislike them as opposed to not liking them and not trusting them, you might say, well, I guess they're not all bad, right? So there's some imbalance, but you're comforted by the fact that there's agreement. So again, the idea is that if you like somebody and you two disagree on an object, it may make you reconsider your position of the object, or maybe reconsider them. How could they like that thing, which I think is so awful, right? So you'll try to recreate balance. And again, likewise, if you dislike somebody or you don't respect them, and they like something you like, it may make you reconsider your position, or it may make you reconsider how you think about them, so you can achieve balance. This brings us to congruity theory. And really, these are brother and sister because they had one theory and decided to turn it into a different theory. So it's the spawn of balance theory, which I guess makes it more the child, but whatever. So congruity theory, the research tells us, is generally true. It's generally true, but not by degrees. So it's able to predict generally what happens, the direction of change, as we say, but it can't measure the magnitude of it. So it's going to tell us how things are going to change. Are they going to be better? Are they going to be worse? It can predict that. It's good at that. It's not good at predicting how much better, how much worse. That's just sort of the intro to it, that conceptually it's a good theory. The magnitude of it is not so hot, right? This theory, again, is very useful for discussing endorsements, especially to understand the mutual effect of when you have a celebrity, say, and a product, or it could be a politician and an issue, whatever it is, or a person and a behavior, right? Whatever, right? Like you go to church. Now I think more of you, or I think less of you, or I think more going to church, or I think less of going to church, right? I mean, whatever it might be, right? So there's a mutual effect on the person and the object, that both of those are going to be changed. That's the main idea here, right? So it's useful to understand how those things are mutually affected. So there are some letters here in this one as well. I know these theories and letters, what can I tell you? So C represents our initial attitude toward the concept. C is for concept. So it's the initial attitude you have of the concept. So let's just say it's a product. It doesn't matter what the product is, but there's a product. So that's the concept. S is your initial attitude toward the source. what do you think of the celebrity? We're just going to say celebrity just to make it easy for right now. So the C is the concept or product. S is your initial attitude toward the source. Just generally speaking, what do you think of that celebrity? And then P is called the pressure toward congruity, right? P for pressure. The pressure toward congruity is measured by the distance between the C and the S. Like, if you're getting lost, it's okay. So what we're saying is, right, in a scenario, if you find a product that there's a product you think is sort of shady. So for instance, maybe it's a silly example, but there's this company out there. It's an insurance, sort of a pension insurance or healthcare insurance. I'm not sure what it is exactly for retirees. And when I see these commercials in daytime television, I don't know. I just sort of think they're shady, right? So I give it a -3 out of, a 5 out of a 10, whatever. I give it a -3. We'll say out of a 5. I give it a -3. But I like the actor. Actually, the celebrity I'm thinking of in this case is Alex Trebek, right? He advertises this product. Alex Trebek is the host of the game show Jeopardy. Anyway, so I like the guy. I give him a +2 out of 5. He's a +2. I mean, if you offered me the chance to have lunch with him, I would take it, right? I think the product is shady. I like the actor. So that pressure to conform, right, is the distance between my two feelings. That would be a 5, right? -3 is 5 points away from +2, right? I hope that makes sense, right? -3 is 5, right? Right, it takes 5 to get me from -3 to 2, 5 to get from 2 to -3, right? They're 5 points. So that's the pressure to conform. So we have that number. So those numbers are important. That -3, that +2, and that 5 are all important because now we're going to do some math. And I mean like some, well, for me, what's serious math. So we're talking about the concept. How is Alex Trebek's endorsement of this insurance going to affect how I view the insurance, the concept? We're going to use what's called absolute value of both the concept and the source. And absolute value means if one's a negative, you don't make it a negative. We don't talk about negatives or positives. That -3 is just a 3. +2 is just a 2. We use what's called the absolute value. And absolute value is represented by 2 upright lines with a number in between them. Sorry if it feels like algebra all over again. Just hang in there with me. Just hang in there, right? Here's the formula. Isn't that beautiful? So the absolute value of the concept over the sum of the absolute value of the concept and the source, right? That number is then multiplied by the pressure to conform absolute value equals, you see that triangle, that delta, it means a change in the concept. Let's work with the numbers. Please don't die yet. Don't leave me now, right? Don't go toward the light. Stay with me. Go toward the math. It's going to be okay. So that -3 is, we're using absolute values, is a 3 over a 3 plus 2, right? The concept was a 3, the source was a 2. It was a -3, but it doesn't matter because all absolute value. So 3 over 3 plus 2 times 5, we said the pressure to conform is a 5, equals, right? If we do our math, right, that means it's 3 over 5 times a 5, which is like a 5 over 1, which would be a 15 over 5, right? Because we multiply across. Now we're multiplying whole numbers, put the 5 over a 1, right? So 3 times 5 is a 15 over 5 times 1, which is a 5, and that means a 3. So all of this means the delta, which is the C, or the delta of C, the change in C is going to be a plus or minus 3. You don't know what you just heard. Let me go over this again. It's okay. So that number we came up with is 3. So the concept is at -2. And the view of the source was a positive, the view of the concept was -3. The view of the source is a positive 2. So I'm now going to shift by 3 points, and these numbers are going to converge. So it's plus or minus depending on which way is going to be convergence, right? Be more congruous. So my view of the product is going to actually move up 3 points. I'm going to go from a -3 to a 0, right? I'm going to move closer toward the source. So the change in my view of the concept is going to be a 3 because Alex Trebek recommends it, and I think he's a decent guy, probably. I now think more of the concept. And by how much? By 3. Now, Alex Trebek, though, he doesn't get away scot-free here, right? Because he's endorsing a product I'm not sure I think very much of. The formula is just like the concept, which is we change the letters around, right? Absolute value of the source divided by the sum of the source and the concept, all that multiplied by the pressure to conform is going to be the change in source. So there it is. Okay, look at the handouts, the formulas are there, right? So using all the absolute values means 2 over 2 plus 3 multiplied by 5, which is doing your math, or you always show your work, it looks like this, right? 2 times 5 is 10, 5 times 1 is 5, it means a 2. All that means there is a change in the evaluation of the source is a 2, a plus or a minus of a 2. That means, because the movement toward the source, or from the source of the concept is going to be the negative direction, right? So they'll be sort of toward each other now. I'm going to think now 2 less of Alex Trebek. He was a positive 2. Now I'm not sure what I think of him. He's a 0. So in the end, I think more of the product, but I think less of him, right? Sometimes there may be an idea or a product you really like. You don't think much of the celebrity. They endorse it. You're going to think a little more of the celebrity or a little more of that politician. But because they endorsed it, you might think a little bit less of the concept, right? That's the idea here, is that both the celebrity or whoever's endorsing the idea and the idea itself are both mutually affected and they're drawn toward each other. If you like the celebrity but not the product, you'll think more of the product and less of the celebrity, and vice versa, right? A celebrity endorses a political position you agree with, you think a little bit less of the idea actually, but you will think more of the celebrity, right? And that's really the key. That's really the key takeaway. So the math of this all may be off, and in the end, you really don't have to do the math. I just wanted to show you how it worked. Sorry I put you through that. The math may be off, but the principle is important. There's that mutual effect on the source and the